Thanks for the background team to organize this and also starting the live stream. So I am Shrishtee Bajpai. I am with Kalpavriksh. I'm a writer, researcher, activist working on environmental justice and social justice themes, and a member of Vikalp Sangam and Kalpavriksh group. And we are quite looking forward to today's very crucial and important session around the Great Nicobar Betrayal book, but largely on the issue of what's happening in the islands and what all is at the risk. Many of you might know who are joining today, but just to give a bit of a background, the Great Nicobar Island is the southernmost and the largest landmass in the chain that makes up the Nicobar Islands in the Bay of Bengal. And a massive 72,000 crore project is being planned for the development of the island. And it's going to result into destroying of the island's delicate rainforest ecosystem, its indigenous peoples and communities, its biodiversity. And today we are going to really understand from some of the experts who have joined us today, three of them, of what really is happening and what has been going on in the background of this massive project. There's a book that Pankaj Sekhsaria has compiled. Pankaj has joined us today that has kind of brought together various experts and who have examined this project from various angles of environmental, geological, impact on local communities, law, due process, and other important themes. And so all of these pieces shed light on the magnitude of the disaster that is being unleashed in the islands, and also, in many ways, a warning and a catalogue of man-made catastrophe that lurks on the horizon. So I won't take too long and actually invite Pankaj, who would give us at the start what the book is about, but also the magnitude and the scale of these projects being proposed in the islands. And then we have Norma Alvares and Manish Chandi to speak specifically about the issues that they have focused on in their chapters in this book. So I'll first welcome Pankaj and give a brief introduction to you. Pankaj is a longtime member of Environmental Action Group Kalpavriksh. He is also currently Associate Professor for Center for Technology Alternatives for Rural Areas, IIT Bombay. And he has worked extensively on issues of Andaman and Nicobar Islands for over 3 decades and has authored, edited 5 books on the islands. These includes Islands in Flux, Waiting for Turtles, and the Great Nicobar Betrayal, which is the recent one, and he will be focusing on that. So, Pankaj, over to you. At about 20-21 minutes, I'll just give you a hint that your time is coming to close, and then we'll move to Norma and Manish.
Yeah, thank you very much. I hope I'm audible. Thank you, Shrishtee, and a really warm welcome to my colleagues in the book, Norma, Manish, and also Shrishtee, because actually all four of us are contributors to this book. And in that sense, I'm also very delighted because we've been talking about the book, but this is the first kind of webinar that we're doing after the book came out. And also it's great to be on a panel with 4 contributors. They've all contributed, and I'll also share those details. But what I will do, I mean, I really jump into the whole thing, is to give you a quick overview and a snapshot, so to say, of the project and, of course, what the book documents. And then we'll have Manish speak on one dimension on which he has worked for a very long time in the islands. And Norma share with her from what she's written in the book about the project and what happened in the National Green Tribunal. So I'll take about not more than 25 minutes. And like Shrishtee said, she will let me know, because there is so much to be said. And as a matter of fact, even as we speak, things are unfolding. In the last 10-15 days, a lot new has come out about this project. It has been asked a lot about in Parliament. It has been there in the media. Political parties have been issuing statements. So lots of things are unfolding. So it's not going to be possible to capture the whole thing, but I'll try and do the best of what I can. So I'll share my screen here, and I hope this is visible. This is the, is that visible, Shrishtee?
Yeah, go ahead.
All right, great, thank you. So like was mentioned, we've recently done this book called The Great Nicobar Betrayal, which is a collection of 13 short pieces published over the last 2 years by a range of authors, including, like I mentioned to you, the four on the panel today. It's published by Frontline, which has kind of really been very supportive and covering this issue substantially. So here on the left-hand side of the picture is Great Nicobar Island. And what you see in the marked out in yellow is the project area that Shrishtee mentioned is the Great Nicobar project, as it were. It's about 19 to 20% of the landmass of Great Nicobar Island. It's a massive project of 72,000 crores. Yesterday's statement in Parliament actually has pegged the number as 81,000 crores. So it's probably even gone higher than what has been proposed in the whole thing. And also so these are the four components of this project. As you can see, number one is the International Transshipment Terminal, which is really at the heart of the whole thing. It's almost like 45,000 crores, or about 60% of the investment proposed is on this port. Number two here is an airport, an international airport that is also now supposed to be a dual purpose airport. At number three is this huge, more than 100 square kilometers of township, or a greenfield township and a tourism project, where, as per statement made in Parliament, there are 1 million trees that are likely to be lost. That's that area roughly. And then there is, at number four, is a power plant, as one can imagine, will be required to run this entire project. And what you see on the right-hand side is the March 2021 pre-feasibility report that was asked for and in a response to the Niti Aayog, put out in March 2021 by a Gurgaon-based consultant company called AECOM. And in some senses, that sets the tone of what the project was and what has finally unfolded and what is coming through. There are a couple of things I just want to flag is that what we have seen in the last 2-3 years since this report came out is an extremely efficient, coordinated, and in some senses, a very aggressive process of pushing the project at multiple levels, legally, particularly. And I will show and give you some examples of that, and also what the problems with that whole thing is. And it's really amazing the kind of coordination, precision, efficiency with which the system has worked and overworked to make, to clear the ground literally for this project to actually happen. So, I mean, probably not requiring much of an introduction, but here we are, the Andaman and Nicobar Islands, far away from mainland India. We are a peak of a submerged mountain range, separated Andaman and Nicobar by the 10-degree channel. And this island here at the extreme bottom where the cursor is moving, and I hope you can see that, is the island of Great Nicobar that is at the heart of what we're discussing. 910 or probably 920, maybe 910 square kilometers. It's among the largest in the Nicobar group, and one of the larger islands as a single landmass in the entire Andaman and Nicobar group. It is the southernmost tip of India, as we know, Indira Point, where the lighthouse stands. And what I just want to point to you, which is of very great significance, is this star at the bottom right of the map. That little landmass that is jutting out of that map there is Sumatra of Indonesia. And that star is approximately the epicenter of the earthquake of December 2004. We are in the 20th year of that massive earthquake and tsunami. We all know the South and Southeast Asian tsunami that killed a few, probably 500,000 people or more, destroyed property worth billions of dollars all over South and Southeast Asia. And this was the epicenter. So it's actually in the neighborhood of the Andaman and Nicobar Islands, and particularly Great Nicobar, where this earthquake happened. And that's something that's very important to keep in mind, particularly in the context of the project that we're talking about. And again, like Shrishtee mentioned, the issues about this project are multifaceted. They cut across all domains, and I will refer to some of these, and of course, Norma and Manish will also talk about in more detail, particularly about where the indigenous people are concerned and the legal process is concerned. But the concerns, when we look at the details of the project and we start to investigate it, and what the book also documents, are ecological, there are geological, they're about the indigenous people, there are concerns on the economic viability of the project. There are serious concerns on the legal and the due process issues, which I will share with you in a bit. This is just a quick, very, very quick idea of the richness is that It's an amazingly rich tropical landscape, 910 square kilometers of largely one would consider untouched tropical forests, except for use by the indigenous communities and a small settler population that has been there for the last 3-4 decades. Uh, with an interesting historical context, and one must say with legitimate demands and needs. Uh, but the richness of this forest, and I don't have the numbers off the tip of my fingers now, but very rich in terms of what is offered as from biodiversity point of view. Uh, Rareness, uniqueness, endemism, all of that is very, very important over there. And there's a lot of work to kind of show that. And also what one realizes is that there are probably many unknown unknowns. So detailed studies will perhaps reveal more about what the biological diversity of this island is. One of the well-known species or one of the charismatic species is the Nigopari megapode or the Nicobar spurfowl, which is an endemic, which is a Nicobar endemic, which means it's not found anywhere else on planet Earth. I think in 5 or 6 islands in the Nicobar group, if I remember right. A chicken-sized bird, that's a ground-dwelling bird with very interesting nesting behavior. They just bury their eggs in soil and don't incubate them. So it is just one example of great diversity and great uniqueness that this island has. And of course, the other one, just as one example, is the giant leatherback turtle, which is one of 7 species of sea turtles that are found on planet Earth. It is the largest of the 7 species, can grow up to 600-700 kilograms in weight, can be 6-7 feet in length. And the Andaman and Nicobar Islands are the beaches of the Andaman and Nicobar Islands are the only nesting sites of this creature in India. And it's reasonably well established that the Nicobar Islands in particular and Great Nicobar is one of the most significant nesting sites of the giant leatherback in the entire northern Indian Ocean. And what is important is if we go back to this map that I showed you in the beginning. So number one, the port is going to be located in a place called Galathea Bay, which as you can see is actually it's a lovely bay in the sense of the shape and stuff like that. And this is where that 42,000 crore investment is going to be made. And Galathea Bay is, even in the Nicobar Islands, is among them is one of the most important nesting sites. So there is a lot of, it's one of the sites that also been more studied and recorded in terms of nesting. And there's a lot of data over the last few years to suggest what is the numbers of turtles that nest here, particularly giant leatherback, but 3 other species also nest on the beaches here. Now, this is the bay in which the port is going to come up, and we probably are slated to lose what is one of the most important and finest nesting sites of the leatherback in the northern Indian Ocean. And there are 2 or 3 things I just want to point to you over here, both in terms of the ecological violations, but also legal and due process violations. So one is that this bay today, and this is an earlier design of the berths, probably has changed a bit. But what's significant to keep in mind is that the opening of this mouth is about 3 kilometers wide today. And when the port is going to come up, you're going to build the breakwaters. You will obviously need to construct breakwaters, and like you can see in this design. And a mouth of the bay that is about 3 kilometers wide will now be restricted by 90%. So presumably a leatherback and other turtles who are accessing their nesting sites, their traditional nesting sites, through a mouth that is 3 kilometers wide, will be restricted to only 300 meters. And this is going to be then in competition with the ships that are coming in and out, the light pollution, the sound that will be there, certainly the occasional oil spill or the oil discharge. So what chance is really there for the leatherback turtle that has been nesting here for we don't know how long to be able to access his nesting site? So that's one thing to keep in mind. Now, what's also amazing about the little research that we know from the islands is that the giant leatherbacks, this is a study done by Dakshin Foundation and the Andaman and Nicobar Forest Department. These were satellite, leatherbacks were satellite tagged, not in Nicobar, but on beaches in the Andaman Islands. And the turtles that nest in the Andaman Islands also have been recorded on Galathea Bay. So one can safely assume that we can also be talking about the Galathea Bay leatherbacks when I'm saying what I'm just saying, that the satellite tracking showed that after nesting on the beaches in these islands, these turtles swim as far as Madagascar on the western side. That's more than 12,000 kilometers, and to the Australian waters on the eastern side. So these really are the giant mariners. And what this port will do is it's a fatal blow on one of the most important nesting sites. So that's very, very important to keep in mind. Now, look at this, almost a subterfuge that is there. Now, I just want to point to you to the date at the bottom left. And also to mention that in 1997, this Galathea Bay, about 12 square kilometers, was proposed as a wildlife sanctuary under the Wildlife Protection Act. And that is because it is a very, very crucial nesting site for turtles. There are coral reefs here, there are mangroves, and the coastal forests just behind the beaches are also nesting sites of the Nicobari megapode. So it was presumably understood to be an important ecological site, and that's why it was declared as or proposed to be a wildlife sanctuary. Now, like I said, look at the date. On 19th of January 2021, the Ministry of Environment and Forests releases the National Marine Turtle Action Plan, which is signed off by the then Environment Minister. In this document, and you can see circled in red is the Galathea Bay, which has been explicitly listed along with the other beaches and spaces in Nicobar and the Andaman Islands. And actually, you see in the bracket, it only says Great Nicobar, as the largest leatherback nesting ground in India. And so it's an acknowledgement on 19th of January, that this is one of the most important marine turtle habitats in India. And at that point of time, presumably that sanctuary is still there in the sense that it's proposed. But what's very interesting is, so on the 19th of January, like you can see circled, is when this Marine Turtle Action Plan is released. But exactly 15 days earlier, on the 5th of January of the same, just 2 weeks earlier, in a meeting of the Wildlife Board, the National Board for Wildlife, the denotification of the Galathea Bay Wildlife Sanctuary has been approved by the Standing Committee by explicitly saying, and the language is very interesting, that this is a good site for a port. So it's okay to denotify the wildlife sanctuary. So on the one hand, one might argue that the left hand does not know what the right hand is doing. But on the other hand, probably one would argue that this has all been planned, because it was known that if the sanctuary remains, even as a proposed sanctuary, the port cannot be allowed, because this is also CRZ 1A, where no port construction can be allowed. So the playing around with the law and the due process is very striking, and it happens again and again and again. And these are the minutes of the meeting of the National Board for Wildlife, when the Wildlife Institute of India director does say that the WI has opined that authorities develop and implement a mitigation plan to facilitate leatherback and other turtles to continuously nest. How is that going to be possible when you have a port coming up there, when you have a breakwater that will block the entry to the bay by 90%? But it has signed off, and because it's the Wildlife Institute of India, it gets signed off. And very interestingly, a group filed an RTI in June of 2021. You can see on the right-hand top, the reply from the Wildlife Institute of India actually says that we have not conducted any study exclusively on the leatherbacks of Andaman and Nicobar ecology, and of the Andaman and Nicobar Islands, where the cursor is moving. So the institution that has not conducted any study gets the right and actually attests and signs off and says that what is perhaps the most interesting and most important nesting habitat of the leatherback, as recorded in the National Marine Turtle Action Plan, can be denotified. So that is one dimension to it. And Manish will also speak about some of the other dimensions where the indigenous people are concerned. But I just want to point to how the agencies and the state, with the mandate to protect what is supposed to be their responsibility, how they're kind of signing off on all these things. And here is a letter signed, like you will see, by the Director of Tribal Welfare, and which is the mandated agency for the protection of the indigenous communities there. The Shompen, which is a PVTG, which is a particularly vulnerable tribal group, and the Nicobaris, with largely larger numbers, more engagement with the outside world, but still with primary rights on the forest and the resources there. A large part of Great Nicobar is also a tribal reserve under a local regulation of 1956. Almost 95% of that island is a tribal reserve. And here you have a statement, as you will see, the Director of Tribal Welfare saying, we undertakes that wherever any exemption is required from the existing provisions of regulations, policies, law of the land, this directorate will seek required exemptions from the competent authority to the effect. So the very agency that is supposed to protect the rights of these indigenous people is committing to denotify and make available the land that is in their name and for them. Also, there is this absolutely crazy idea of what will happen when the project comes up. So this is the initial part of the document, initial part of the proposal, where it is said that this island's population, as you can see circled in red, will become 6.5 lakh in 2050. Today, the population of Great Nicobar by the 2011 census is 8,000 people. It's probably less on the ground in 2024. Just imagine the change that will take place. And that's the concern, a serious concern of all kinds, on the local people, on the indigenous people, on the ecology, on resources. So when some people raised the question that this is too much, the next version of the proposal said, okay, if that's too much, we'll make it 3 lakh people. So the current position is that by 2050, the population of this island will be 3 or 3.5 lakh people. So obviously, there's no thinking into what has gone into the whole thing, which is the point we've been trying to make. Also, I just want to flag that the total population of the entire Andaman and Nicobar Islands is roughly 5 lakh people today. That's over 600 big and small islands. So after so many years of settlement and colonization, if the population of the entire chain is 5 lakh, imagine what will happen to one island when roughly those number of people are going to be inside that one particular island. And it gets worse and worse in the sense that there is this statement in the one of the reports, because somebody had raised concerns and they have said that, we will separate the tribal area and the settlement area by barbed wires if necessary. And the recent statement in Parliament says that there will not be a problem with outsiders coming in because we will geofence the landmass of the people or something of that kind. They will put watchtowers and they'll do geofencing, which is not very clear as to what that means. I will quickly come to one very important dimension is the geological dimension. So what is very, very scary about this island and the project is that the Andaman and Nicobar Islands sits on the Ring of Fire. All along the Pacific Ocean, we see this, the regular earthquakes and tsunamis and all that are all happening in a landscape of which the Andaman and Nicobar are part. On an average, the Andaman and Nicobar Islands have 1 earthquake a week. It's very important to keep in mind. I showed you that point where the earthquake was in 2004. And while we all remember 2004 for the tsunami, what the earthquake that caused the tsunami did is very important to keep in mind, because that really changed the lay of the land. And these are very interesting satellite imageries pre and post the earthquake of 2004. So if you look at, say, the top maps, on the top you see 21st of December 2004. And on the right-hand side, you see 26th of December 2004, which is the evening, incidentally, of that earthquake. And what you see circled in red is that part of the landmass, in yellow, sorry, that part of the landmass of Kachal that was above the high tide line or above the sea, which is now submerged in water. So what happened when the earthquake happened on 26th of December in the Andaman and Nicobar Islands? The islands tilted almost like a child's seesaw would do in the playgrounds that we have. So the Andaman Islands, and you will see this in the map on the top left, part of the Andaman Islands saw a permanent uplift of about 1 to 2 meters. And Nicobar Island, the images that you see, the maps you see are of Kachal, which is in the central Nicobars. But Nicobar Island, which is the island we're talking about, saw a permanent subsidence that morning of 4 meters. So the coastline where the port is proposed today saw a permanent subsidence of 15 feet just 20 years ago. So even if we were to forget for a moment the ecological loss, the loss to the tribal communities, to everything else, imagine investing something of the tune of 40 to 50,000 crores, another earthquake, another shift of land, above or below, and that entire investment is also lost. And this is simply not being considered in the project proposal. And I'll give you an example of how this is kind of done. This is Wapcos India Limited, and this is a 2019 document, which is a traffic study for creating the transshipment port. So this has been in discussion for a long time. 2021 was when the proposal came. Now, what this document says, and I just want to point to, I come to the text, but just look at the two figures on the left-hand side. The image on the left is of the lighthouse at Indira Point, India's southernmost tip, which you can clearly see is way above the high tide line. It is standing amidst forest. It is the same lighthouse, if you see the picture today, and all pictures today, including when the president went there, you see this lighthouse now stands surrounded by the waters of the Andaman Sea. And why does this happen, or why did this happen? This happened because of this tectonic activity and the subsidence of the land. Now, this is a phenomenal change, as you can imagine. And imagine putting a port over here. What will happen to everything? Beside the physical damage, your entire draft is likely to change if the land rises or falls. But if you see on the right-hand side, at least in this document, which is the WAPCOS document for the port, in 2019, if you see what's highlighted in yellow, it says the topography of the island is best suited for a port which has not been damaged much even by the tsunami of 26 November 2004. So they get the date wrong, but we can grant them that. But how can this coastline not be considered a coastline that has seen damage or where topography has not changed when there's so much evidence? Because what you see highlighted in blue is actually a report of researchers from IIT Kanpur, which says land subsidence of 3 to 4 meters of the Great Nicobar southern tip. And this port project is maybe not more than 20-25 kilometers north of this particular thing. So,
Pankaj,
yeah, I'm run out of time.
You have 3 more minutes.
Okay, fine. I will come to the shoddiness of the EIA report, for instance, is to look at, this is the EIA report, a 1,000-page EIA report based on which clearance was granted. And here you have this is text from the EIA report, which the Environment Appraisal Committee of the MOEF said was okay and suggested clearance, and then the MOEF granted clearance. So I just see what they write. Added to the problem was biting insects, including mosquitoes. Further, when one tries to look upwards to find out what tree it is not just one, but many. Then they go on to say it was impossible to use any measuring devices like tape to make any quadrant in the forest vegetation. Hence, intensive survey was carried out on both sides of Campbell Bay. It is about 45 kilometers. Now, 130 square kilometers of the most pristine forest in this country with the most diverse wildlife and biodiversity, 1 million trees, home to two of the most important or the most vulnerable indigenous communities in this country, in a landscape that is the most geologically vulnerable and volatile. And this is the kind of work that has been done, which the powers that be and the honorables that be in our ministries are not able to see through. Imagine the tragedy that is actually happening here. One of the environmental clearances, which is this is the November 22 document. And I'll give you, just take an extra minute, Shrishtee, I'm wrapping up. Trees with nesting holes of endemic owls to be identified and geotagged with the help of SACON. Such trees shall be safeguarded as far as possible. I mean, if bird watchers here will know how difficult it is to find owls, find nesting holes of owls, of endemic owls, and then geotag the trees, and then what is the purpose if you say that they will be safeguarded as far as possible? Because the clearance is precisely for the cutting down of these very trees. And then, of course, after all the sins have been committed, we have signed off on this 130 square kilometers by notifying 260 square kilometers of land in the Aravallis in Haryana as forest, as compensation. So ecologically, I mean, logically, from all perspectives, it's absolutely bizarre what's actually being done. So this is really a snapshot, and we're covering a lot of this in the book. And of course, Norma and Manish will say a lot more, but I'll just finish because I think with what's going on with this whole thing, we might just be in for the discovery of a new species. So I think we can't. I think we are capable of that now. I think and our systems are capable. So we might just have a Haryanvi megapode for all you know. Bird watchers don't need to make the effort to go down to the Nicobars. I mean, particularly our bird watchers in Delhi, you have something very close in your neighborhood. So this is the book, and I mean that's all I have to say for now. Of course, there's a lot more. Uh, there was a special issue of Frontline. There was a special issue of Sanctuary Asia. Kalpavriksh did a report a little earlier. And I'll just stop here with this last point, Shrishtee. We made this very extensive, very comprehensive timeline on the project because so many things were happening that we were not able to track it. So we created this PDF, which if you scan this QR, you will be taken to that. This is a document, and this is page 7 and 8 or 8 and 9, which has about 250 or 200 dates, which have been seen the progression of the project. And each date is hyperlinked into a Google Drive with giving you access to the document. So anything that you need to know about the project, pretty much all is here till June of 2024. Yeah, so that's it. Thank you very much. This is my email ID, and please do feel free to get in touch. Thank you very much, and looking forward to what Norma and Manish have to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Pankaj. Thanks a lot for giving that background to the whole project. I think it gives a very robust overview of what's really happening and unfolding and how unscientific it is and full of lies, and also in many ways by its nature or how it is being proposed, it's not even economically wise to do something like this. So thanks for giving that background. And I would now like to welcome Norma. Norma Alvares is an advocate of Bombay High Court and an activist campaigner on social and environmental issues of public concern. For over 35 years, she has argued entirely free of cost over 300 public interest litigation cases in Bombay High Court, the National Green Tribunal, and in the Supreme Court on environmental issues, human rights issues, women's equality, animal welfare, etc., for Goa's NGOs and citizens group. And Norma, thank you so much for joining us for this conversation. And we're looking forward to especially your inputs on the NGT order and how crazy that order is and bringing out the issues around it. So you have about 12 to 13 minutes to bring those perspectives out. I'll give you a hint close to 11 minutes that your time is, that you have 2 minutes left. Over to you.
Okay, I'm sorry for the sound problem. If there is still, I don't know, but I'll go ahead. Can you hear me clearly?
Yes,
Yes?
we.
Yes. Correct. So the matter which came before NGT was not my case. I did not argue it. It came before the Eastern Zone. I normally argue NGT matters before the Western Zone, which where Goa cases go to. But I wrote about this article and I was interested in the subject. Only I wrote for it, I wrote the article in the leaflet to show the flawed system of law and assessment of environment matters that the NGT has become. The NGT is set up with three objectives. One is to get expert opinion on the case that is before it. Judicial members, as you know, even in the High Court, do not understand many of the environment issues which we bring to it. At least they are not knowledgeable, not understand, they are not knowledgeable. And they invariably say, we are not experts, so we have to rely on the experts. But the NGT is different. There is supposed to be an equal number of judicial and expert members. Ideally, perhaps 2 and 2, but even 1 judicial, 1 expert. This does not happen most of the time. The judicial members sometimes are in excess, and the experts are few and far between. Also, there should be a panel of experts linked with each case, with each forum. if it's a zone, if it's a western zone, you should have somebody knowledgeable on coastal matters, somebody knowledgeable on forest matters, and so on. You cannot expect an expert to know everything on everything, but the expert is there to decide all or to look at all matters. The result is, I find that the judicial members do not treat the experts with great respect. They believe that everything is in their hands. And invariably, you don't have equal number of judicial and expert members. Then the zones are meant for the convenience of citizens so that they can approach people from the particular area, can approach the nearest zone. They can argue the matter themselves. They can speak in the local language because the judges and the experts are supposed to know the local language. The ground and the third reason why the NGT was set up is because the government itself felt that when the ministry is assessing projects and granting environment clearances or forest clearances, the ground reality may not be exactly known to them. And if there are any failings, then when the matters come before NGT, citizens in the know of things would raise these issues before the NGT. However, this was not happening. And what was happening instead at that time is that the northern bench, which called itself principal bench, it is a principal bench for administrative issues. It's not a principal bench which is over the other benches, that is the southern bench, the western bench, the central bench, and so eastern bench, and so on. It is a northern bench. But because it is the administrative seat, it began to take up matters in different cases, in different zones, western zone, southern zone. The chairman would come and sit on the hearings. They would pick up certain matters and take them to Delhi and call themselves the principal bench and so on. And this was completely wrong. The organization that I normally represent in the High Court, the Goa Foundation, went to the High Court on this matter because one of our matters got taken to the center and it was just disposed of without any proper hearing. And we raised the issue of denial of natural justice. We raised other issues also, and the High Court was with us and stopped this practice. Surprisingly, the Northern Bench registrar that is representing the chairman, I suppose, filed an appeal in the Supreme Court asking for a stay. They were not granted that, and the matter is still pending over there. But this is exactly the situation which repeated itself in the Eastern Zone Bench. What happened in the Eastern Bench? The environment and the forest clearance were both challenged in the Eastern Bench. They were challenged by Conservation Action Trust Mumbai. They filed 3 appeals, one against the forest clearance, one against the environment clearance, and one for violation of the CRZ notification. There was one more appeal filed by Ashish Kotari of Pune, which was on the forest clearance and I think the environment clearance as well. Now, NGT overstepped all judicial requirements in the hearing of this case. The matter was listed on that particular date for filing of affidavits in courts, because these are the titles that you get for admission, for hearing, for filing of replies, for orders, and so on. It was listed for filing of affidavits, but on that day, suddenly the bench, which is normally comprises 2 persons, 1 judicial, 1 expert, suddenly comprised 6 members. 4 people came in from the northern bench to sit on this bench on that particular day and hear this matter. The bench was uneven. 4 judicial, 2 experts. So second violation of procedure. And the bench decided that they are going to finally hear the matter. Now, when the matter is fixed for filing of affidavit, senior counsel don't necessarily come. They send someone to give their affidavit or to seek time or whatever. The advocate on record pleaded that he did not know anything about the case. He is just an advocate on record, which is what advocates on record are. They might just know the broad outlines, but they are not equipped to argue the matter. But the NGT simply refused. So the Conservation Action Trust went unrepresented in this so-called final hearing, which was suddenly sprung on the appellants. Kotari's counsel argued whatever he had to argue, but obviously the council must have had some arrangement about you will argue this portion and I will do this. I don't know the details of that, but NGT simply refused an adjournment even for the afternoon session or for the next day, refused it and decided we will hear it. Now, it therefore relied on its own wisdom, and it relied on media reports which it had, and it relied on studies which, as Pankaj has told you, were not done with proper site inspections and with full details in it. This is what NGT relied on. Secondly, it made it clearly said that our judgment is going to examine procedure, whether the procedure has been followed in the grant of the forest clearance and in the grant of the environment clearance. Now, procedure is one thing. Procedure, even a high court can examine. If this is a procedure and you don't follow it, you don't have a public hearing, you don't call for something, anyone can look at it. What is the purpose of the NGT? To look at the environment issues raised in it. Now, what was the NGT stand? The NGT stand was there are so many expert reports which have been produced. They have been produced by knowledgeable people. The ministry has considered all these expert reports. If the experts say all this, which they have studied, how do we differ with it? This is a very strange stand to take because the purpose of the NGT is to examine whether the experts have logically come to a correct conclusion, whether the experts have examined what needs to be experts, and if they differ, which they are empowered to, they can take a contrary stand. So essentially, the NGT was, so to speak, ticking off the boxes. Was a notice issued in the newspaper? Yes. Was a public hearing called for? Yes. Was a copy of the report given to everyone? Yes. Were there expert reports before the final hearing was taken? And so on. And the boxes sort of ticked off. So the NGT decided, in short, to reject the appeals. But there was a guilt complex it had. It realized that it had not examined everything. And so it appointed a high powered committee to examine the deficiencies which the appellants have raised, which meant that appellants raised certain things. NGT did not examine them, so it appointed a high powered committee to examine that. Very well, let's take that there was some sincerity there. But the high powered committee report should have come back to the NGT for the NGT to re examine it, knowing that NGT itself felt it had not examined the deficiencies. Instead, it gave the high powered committee 2 months to come out with a report and no stay on development except if it is an irreversible activity. Now, it does not clarify what is irreversible, and everything is irreversible in the Great Indian Nicobar project, because as Pankaj has said to you, there are several very, very critical issues, and the moment you start on something, it is going to be irreversible. So you don't grant a stay, you give the high-powered committee 2 months. Nobody knows what is to happen to the report which it produces. Nobody is asked to re-examine it. I believe that the high-powered committee has produced a report. But when I spoke with Mr. Devi Goenka of Conservation Action Trust this afternoon, he said we don't have a copy of the report. So the judgment was flawed, seriously flawed, for the following reasons. The usual process was abandoned. It is 2 members, they brought in 6 members, the balance was incorrect. There was denial of natural justice to the appellants because they were not heard, they were not given proper opportunity to be heard. Thirdly, the purpose of the NGT is to examine the environment issues raised in detail. By restricting the hearings to procedures or by confining its judgment to procedures and simply skimming over the environment issues by saying that here are all the reports and quoting from them at length, justice was not done as to whether the environment issues would be compromised if this project came on. And finally, if you do decide to appoint a committee to study the project a little further, then the NGT should have reheard the project, which would have given an opportunity to the appellants to appear before it through their counsel and raise the issues. What were the issues raised? Number one was the purpose of the Nicobar project. There are very two conflicting purposes. One is you say eco-development of the island. The other you say defense and national security. Now, if you're looking at defense, then why are you bringing in a township? Why are you inviting more people into that area? Because if you're looking at defense, then defense is your priority. You cannot have both things simultaneously. You cannot have development of the island, which is what is done even in places like Goa. You want to develop things, but you cannot have it along with saying we also want that point to be our defense. You're putting an international transshipment container, an airport, a power plant, a township. The second issue which was raised is that the tribal communities, original people from the islands, protected vulnerable tribes, the Chopin and the Nicobaris, scheduled tribes, and very vulnerable tribes were going to be gated communities. You're going to put a geofencing or a biofencing or a barbed wire fencing, and you're going to put a surveillance mechanism to watch what they do, where they go, and so on. Third important issue raised was that the project was located in the vicinity of the fault line which resulted in the earthquake. That is the ring of fire, as Pankaj called it, a seismologically vulnerable area. So this needed consideration. How do we protect the area? How do we ensure that the entire money that you invest in the project does not go down the drain? How do you protect your defense by bringing a whole lot of things in? And finally, the fourth, these are the broad main issues. I would say that the appeals raise the fact that this is an ecologically rich waters and an ecologically sensitive land. The ecologically rich waters have the corals, the sharks, the leatherback turtles. The judgment even observed that poaching is happening with poachers who come from Myanmar, from China, from South Asian countries. So a lot of people are coming to poach in these waters. They are ecologically rich areas. You protect those areas. You don't add to its destruction to the destruction of these species. Forest. There was a huge area. The entire 131 square kilometers of area was dense, prime tropical rainforest. It would all be cleared for these 4 projects, which cannot have tropical rainforest in the middle of it. This forest diversion would have a huge impact on the issue of climate change, which we are also sensitive to and grappled with, and a great impact on wildlife habitat. So these are the important issues that were raised by the Conservation Action Trust and by Ashish Kothari. They also pointed out that the terms of reference which had been fixed for the project were not adequately dealt with. Now, a term of reference is a sacred issue. You cannot have a term of reference given to you and you modify it or you don't answer it. Ministry should have pointed it out. Ministry does not point it out. So you come to the NGT, NGT overlooks it. NGT points to a heap of papers, annexures, and says, well, everything is examined. But the Conservation Action Trust had in very detail pointed out how the terms of reference had not been adhered to. They also pointed out that the public hearing was vitiated. See, public hearings are where citizens get a chance to voice their projects. Unfortunately, nowadays, they are just become a sort of rubber stamp issue. The collector calls the hearing, the public comes, they raise the issues, they take down the notes, and the ministry throws them all in the basket, I think. But even so, the public hearing was with flaws, and that was pointed out by the by the Conservation Action Trust. And
No,
then they pointed out that, yeah,
no,
and
time is up.
yes, I know I'm almost at the end.
Okay.
And then it was pointed out that the island CRZ notification had also been violated. So, in conclusion, the NGT barely examined the issues. The judgment quotes findings from scientific papers and relies upon them. It was a superficial and biased assessment. And why do I say biased? Because when you don't give a proper opportunity to counsel from to the appellant to raise the issues, it means you are afraid of these issues. You don't want to tackle them. You'd rather uh, just let them go by. So you have a conclusion that you want to reach, and you do not allow for proper discussion of these issues. And I would like to conclude by relying on a few lines from the Supreme Court on what is the environment rule of law. The Supreme Court made this observation when it was examining the environment clearance for the Mopa airport in Goa. And after castigating the expert appraisal committee for its totally flawed appraisal, the court states this: the NGT, which is vested with appellate jurisdiction over the grant of an EC, failed to comprehend the true nature of its role and power under 16H and Section 20 of the NGT Act. In failing to conduct an assessment, a merits review, the NGT has not discharged an adjudicatory function which properly belongs to it. These sentences would squarely apply to the NGT of the Eastern Zone Bench, which dismissed the appeals. I am told that the Consumer Action Trust appealed the judgment in the Kolkata High Court, basically on denial of natural justice, which means that if the Kolkata High Court agrees with the Conservation Action Trust, the matter would go back to the NGT. It is right now in the Kolkata High Court, but not come up for hearing. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Norma. If you can mute your, I think it is echoing.
Yes, yes.
Thanks a lot. That was fantastic, Norma, for giving us the overview of how the background of cases and petitions has been, and especially how NGT's purpose of why NGT is there, that itself is compromised, and how natural justice and processes have been denied, and there's actually laws and policies are being molded to make sure that this project goes ahead. So thanks for giving that overview and also adding to the issues that Pankaj had already added to, and expanding a bit more from the legal perspectives. So thanks a lot, and I'll now a lot of the comments that have come in from the participants also is that why are we going ahead with this project? It sounds crazy. It's ecologically not viable. It's violating human rights. It's economically not viable. Then why are we going ahead with this project? So I hope you all are here, and I will maybe one by one some of the questions. We have about 10 minutes left, so we won't be able to take all the questions, but be assured that we have taken note of these questions, and hopefully they can be answered subsequently. But we'll take some questions that have come in and have are trying to maybe move forward in terms of understanding a little bit of details of the issues. So I'll start with a few questions that were specifically one for you, Norma, that when the courts have become inclined to be so deaf and blind and really basically not following what they're meant to follow, then what is left for us to go to the court, and why do we go to the courts? And in that sense, can we really approach the court of law for these issues? And maybe further to add, somebody has also asked that since several people, especially in relation to going to the court, there's another question about the displaced Nicobari is losing their cultural and linguistic diversity. If they're continuing to be displaced, can that be also approached in the court of law? So I would invite any one of you actually to come in if you want to. Norma, Pankaj, Manish, if you want to reflect on these.
See, the issue of why do we go to courts? It has practically become the last bastion of hope. So there are some cases that go this way, where the judges, for whatever reason, they are either preset. There is an agenda with which they are working, but there are a large number of matters where the court does help, and sometimes it is like a gambling house. You just hope that you can convince the judges of the issues that you're raising. When the NGT started, the judges, the expert, and the judicial members were very, very aware of what they were meant to look at, and they did so. And we personally, I had several successful environment issues which I raised and defended in the NGT. So I think asking why you go to a court is not an answer. If you can, I always say to people, if you can do something else, please do it. The court is the last place to go to, because you may not get what you want. It depends on the how the judges themselves are thinking, what their views are. A lot of things come in the way. But if there's nothing else that you can do, then take a chance with the courts. That's the way I look at it. Yeah.
But also, I think the consideration, I think Shankar Raman has also asked that can this be taken to the Supreme Court, or can we go to any larger forums to approach this question?
No, you see what the Conservation Action Trust has done is that they have done the right thing. They have appealed it in the Kolkata High Court. I am told that there is no development on the project going on now. I really don't know the realities of the situation, but they have gone to the court on precisely the ground that the NGT did not hear them. Now, denial of natural justice is a very strong ground. So the High Court is bound to send the matter back to the NGT and say, hear them. If they can make out their case that they were denied natural justice, and they can make it out by saying that our counsel was not present, we were not prepared, we submitted nothing, and yet the judgment was delivered in our absence, it is denial of natural justice. They can, exactly what I showed you. So it would go back for a hearing, when hopefully they would get a better hearing, after which you can go to the Supreme Court and challenge. The entire thing can be challenged. There you'll get a better hearing, but you have to go through the rigors of it. So I imagine that if anything starts on the ground, they would immediately call up their appeal in the Kolkata High Court and bring the matter, ask for the matter to be taken up.
Thanks, Norma. There's another question regarding, can the economic benefits of the Great Nicobar project be achieved in a manner that is sustainable? Is there a way forward for a more balanced economic development?
I just like to make 2, 3 quick larger points. One which generally did not get discussed but does come up is this whole defense angle and the strategic. And it's important to keep in mind that there might be a strategic context to Great Nicobar, but this project is an out and out commercial project. And I think Norma pointed out in interesting ways, in multiple ways. This is a transshipment commercial port. This is a tourism township. So we have to look at it as a commercial project. So that's point number one. Because what happens is that when we raise these questions, the discussion is sidetracked into saying, oh, but then what about? But no, this is not a defense project. So that's something very important to keep in mind. Two is, if in this whole discussion and all the work that we've done, the economic angle has not been discussed. And we have to say that in this whole set of people that have been working, including the book, The Great Nicobar Betrayal, we've not discussed with that angle because we have to admit it, we don't have the expertise. It needs to be studied. And I mean, I'm hoping there are people on the talk, on the call today and otherwise, that let's look at what the economic dimensions of this project are, because at the heart is a 45,000 crore or 42,000 crore port project, where there have to be some traffic projection, some movement of traffic, some revenue has to be generated. So what are the numbers that are being offered? And prima facie, it looks problematic, but I don't know. So that is something, if we can have somebody look at that. And then the third and final point where the commercial aspect is concerned is that even if all this was to come, and we've discussed this now, we are sitting on one of the most tectonically active fault lines. This is the most seismically active zone on planet Earth. A earthquake or a tsunami is very much a possibility. And even if all this investment goes in, we are creating high risk to investment and to a lot of things. Is it worth it? Has that risk been evaluated? What is the cost of that risk? And then who's going to invest in all of this? These are questions that the project proponents have to ask, the government has to ask, and all of us should be asking and working with. So I'll just kind of, much more to be said, but for a moment, I'll kind of just add that on the economic question that, I mean, like what Manish has said, of course, what has to happen there for local people, but in the larger context, what is the economic viability and economic risk is something that people, I think, better equipped than us should be looking at.
There are many questions, many comments, and as usual, I think after listening to this project and the disaster that it is, I guess a lot of people feel quite helpless as to what they can do and also wanting to do something about it. So I guess some of the comments were around that, and I just want to raise it to all three of you that what can be done, what can common citizens, people who are enraged by this issue, what can they do, how can they support it? There's a group of people who are working behind, who are people like you all, who are putting in so much effort in going to the court, petitioning, doing background research. How can people support this? What can we do?
Is there anyone who's taking charge of this kind of raising awareness and getting mobilizing people who want to do something about it? You have to have some forum which will take up the issue, because I think the government does not accept that our environment is our greatest security. When all else fails, in the face of tsunamis and floods and earthquakes and flooding and fires, it is our environment which is the asset for ordinary people. Maybe the rich will fly elsewhere. But for ordinary people, and that is why, in fact, I took up environment cases, because I realized that for people who are living at a on a base kind of a level, and the sense of they go to work, they make a bit of money, they come home, they keep their families, their environment is their security. And this is not accepted by the government, which has a belief that they need to have development programs to bring prosperity to people who already are prosperous in a very simple way. So this is what is wrong in the whole setup. And if people want to do something, I think people's power is great. I've seen in limited areas, like in my state, where there was a law trying to be brought about to change bring in development in areas which are eco-sensitive. The whole mass movement was created and the bill was withdrawn. Now here's the case where it is approved, it's gone to the NGT, it's failed over there, obviously, and there is a prospect of it being considered by the Supreme Court at some stage. But a lot of information which can be written about and protests organized in a creative way. When, for example, in Goa, there was an attempt to bring three infrastructures through the wildlife sanctuary, a team of young people got together and with visuals, they raised the issue among people. Of course, this is within the state. And at a national level, it is different. And this is the Andaman and Nicobar Islands, which are away from our ordinary daily lives and so on. But we must find some creative ways for people to protest this kind of assault, nothing short of it, assault on these islands, which is counterproductive. You destroy the environment, you place your hopes on some transnational, whatever shipment thing, which you think will be a counter defense to attacks and so on. It's just not going to work. But I don't think enough is being written about it and raised. And in that sense, Pankaj's book is raising the issue. So we have to take it forward from there in some sense, in some way. I don't have any ideas right now, but these are the examples that I've given you in my state with a local protest which can put the government on the back foot.
Pankaj, do you want to add something to this?
No, I can only agree, and I think Norma put it very well. So I would say that I think that one challenge of this place, unlike say a Goa, is that this is really remote. There are very few people there, and then the interests are in a sense divided because settlers are kind of the settler population, which is larger in number, is quite supportive of the project. So that's long distance, and that has been one challenge how to mobilize. But on the other hand, I also see even this event as one step forward in that process of generating larger interest. The fact that I have been writing, but in the last year or so, there's been a lot of media, uh, both legacy media, newspapers, online media that's taken it up. Exactly like Norma mentioned, there are groups of younger people who are trying to do campaigns. They have been in touch, raising concerns. So I think all of these are going to add up to that larger jigsaw of what we can do. It's raising our own awareness, public awareness. Of course, if we can get more media, there are some suggestions there. We've been trying to do events around the book, around this topic. So to the extent possible, that can continue to happen. I do feel more research, and I think Manish and others have also pointed out, looking at the scientific aspects, writing about that. Uh, Legal intervention, of course, is there. It will take its own course because, like Norma mentioned, it has to go through through the motions, as it were. It has to go through that process of first maybe the NGT, then the High Court, then whatever it might be. Uh, like I said, economic evaluations of the whole thing. And one thing I've been thinking of more recently is if we can have more non-English media get involved. So whether it is with the already published articles like the book, which, I mean, the book itself is a collection of published work. It's not new work. So we are trying, I mean, there's an attempt to try, say, doing a Hindi version of the book perhaps, but maybe Bengali, maybe Tamil, maybe other languages. So that's also a way to get people involved, get to reach out. So these are the normal things that one thinks of, all of these things. And just to add to what both Norma and Manish said, so uh, in a sense, I'm hopeful because there has been a much larger mobilization in the last 1 year or so on this. There's so many people aware, participating, asking questions. So we just have to keep at it. Also, that it's been so much in Parliament this time. So yeah, but these are more general things, and we can, of course, individuals, people do get in touch, and we can see what can be done. But a lot can be, I think. It's not so hopeless, I feel.
One more language to include, Pankaj, is Nicobarese as well.
Sure, absolutely, absolutely.
There's a difficulty in getting it translated, but there are people who can translate it. So Nicobar Islanders themselves are aware of what's happening in the neighborhood, which they're very unaware of. Actually, to be honest, they're very, very unaware of what's actually happening and what the larger scheme of things.
We should try. I mean, we should put all of that on our bucket list and try what we can.
No,
Absolutely. I think we'll have to close now, but thanks a lot for actually giving that perspective and detailing out all the issues. It just it just makes you so angry that this is happening. And but really lots of gratitude to all of you, people like you and others who are not here but have been actually putting in a lot of effort doing research and at the risk of in many ways being of your work and being surveilled, what Manish was just mentioning. So it's coming at a huge risk, and I think it's important for all of us who've joined this call and generally for citizenry to how support people like you and others who are actually doing this and stand on this issue much more strongly. Yeah, Pankaj,
I just one quick last pitch is that do consider getting a copy of the book because it's also one way to inform ourselves, but also to reach out. And I mean, it's really, I must say that the contributions there are 10, 11 people who've contributed on a diverse range of things. It's a quick snapshot to get a sense of what the project is. So you can write to me, you can write to the other members in Vikalp Sangam, but do consider getting a copy of the book for yourself and for others, because it could be the starting point of then seeing what else can be done. So thank you so much to my co-panelists, also for having agreed in the first place to be party to the book, Shrishtee, Manish, and Norma, and of course to Vikalp Sangam for having hosted this webinar. And we'd be very happy to be part of other webinars if there are other people here who want to organize, both in physical if it's possible, but certainly online. If you can reach out, we'd be very happy. And I'm saying that on behalf of all of us without taking their permission, because I know they will agree. So thank you very much, everybody.
Thanks, Pankaj. Thanks, everyone.